right, so when you think of ancient Rome, what comes to mind? Probably the same things I do. All-powerful emperors in purple robes, the massive Colosseum, and fearless gladiators with swords and shields, right? It was this incredible empire, famous for its genius engineering and its unstoppable army. It really felt like they were on top of the world. But that's the glossy postcard version of Rome. Tonight, we're going to pull back the curtain on that image, because beneath all the polished marble and towering monuments, there's a much darker story, one that was built on the suffering of millions of people who had no choice. Let's start with a number that's hard to wrap your head around. By the time of Julius Caesar, about 1/3 of Rome's entire population were slaves. Let that sink in. 1 out of every 3 people you'd pass on the street. This wasn't some minor detail. It was the engine that powered the entire Roman economy. And these people came from all over the known world, captured in wars across Europe, Asia, and Africa. They weren't just laborers either. They were teachers, doctors, skilled musicians, and accountants. Your life as a slave could be anything from a relatively comfortable position in a wealthy home to a short, brutal existence down a mine. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, no matter how skilled you were property, an object. And that fundamental fact shaped every single moment of your life. And this is where things get really dark, because when you see millions of people as objects, it becomes terrifyingly easy to be cruel. One of the most infamous Roman punishments was crucifixion. We often think of it in a religious context, but for the Romans, it was a tool, a political weapon. Its main purpose was public humiliation and to send a message. It wasn't just about killing someone. It was about making a slow, agonizing public spectacle out of them, a living billboard that screamed to every other slave, "This is what happens when you step out of line." And if you weren't being threatened with crucifixion, there was the daily reality of physical violence. Beatings were common, for anything from a small mistake to just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, depending on the master's whim. This wasn't just discipline. It was psychological warfare, designed to hammer home one simple idea. You are powerless. But for the ultimate show of brutality, nothing topped the arena. Slaves who were considered defiant or, frankly, disposable could be thrown into the amphitheater to fight to the death or be torn apart by wild animals, all for the sake of entertainment. Can you imagine? Your life ending as a violent spectacle for a cheering crowd. So, being a slave in Rome wasn't just about hard work. It was about living with a constant cold dread in the pit of your stomach, knowing that any day could be your last, and your death might be for sport. But not every horror was a public spectacle. For most slaves, life was a silent, grinding nightmare, hidden away from public view in the mines, on huge farms, and on the warships. So what was it like? Well, picture this. You're in a mine in Spain. You're working in a dark, suffocatingly tight tunnel, breathing in toxic dust all day. Cave-ins are a constant threat. In these conditions, your life expectancy wasn't measured in years, but in months. It was a death sentence with a pickaxe. Or maybe you worked on a latifundium, one of Rome's massive agricultural estates. You'd be out in the scorching sun from dawn till dusk, doing back-breaking labor. On some of these estates, they would literally chain slaves to their tools, just to make sure no one got any ideas about running away. Your spirit wasn't just crushed. It was systematically dismantled. And then there were the galleys, the warships, chained to an oar in a cramped, stinking space below deck, rowing to the rhythm of a drum for hours on end. If your ship went down in a battle or a storm, you went down with it. Your chains became your tomb. But the exploitation didn't stop at physical labor. There was a whole other side to this that was, in some ways, even more twisted. Let's talk about the gladiators again. Sure, we romanticize them, and maybe a rare few did find fame. But for the vast majority, it was a life of pure terror, knowing that your survival depended on killing another person who was in the exact same miserable position as you. It was a death sentence with an audience. Then there was the world of personal entertainment. Slaves had to dance, sing, and perform whenever their master demanded, often facing ridicule and scorn. Their talents weren't a gift. They were just another resource to be exploited. And this leads to the darkest corner of Roman slavery: sexual exploitation. Slaves, men and women, boys and girls, were bought and sold for the sole purpose of their owner's sexual gratification. The horror here isn't just the act itself. It's the complete erasure of their humanity, their consent, their very self. Some owners even bred slaves like livestock to create a new generation of property. It's sickening to even think about, but it was a fundamental part of the system, just like the brothels that were common in every Roman city, filled with slaves who had no say in their fate. But maybe the cruelest part of it all wasn't the physical pain. It was the social death. It was being treated like you weren't even a person. Imagine it. Your entire day, from the moment you wake to the moment you sleep, is controlled by someone else. Your name might even be taken from you. You are a thing. The historical records we have from slaves like Felix, who worked in a wealthy house, paint a grim picture. He talks about having no say over his own body, his time, nothing. His life was just a constant stream of commands, where one tiny mistake could lead to a brutal punishment. Even if you were a highly skilled slave, a doctor, or a tutor, you were never, ever seen as an equal. Your intelligence was just another asset that belonged to your master. The laws were designed to be a constant, humiliating reminder. You wear different clothes, you can't join the army, you can't participate in politics. You are not one of us. So you have to ask, why? Why all this overwhelming, systematic cruelty? The answer is one word: fear. The Roman elite were terrified of the millions of people they enslaved. They were hopelessly outnumbered, and the thought of an uprising kept them awake at night. And that fear was justified. You can't talk about Roman slavery without talking about Spartacus, a gladiator who, between 73 and 71 BC, did the unthinkable. He escaped, built an army of other escaped slaves, at its peak, maybe over 100,000 strong, and shook the Roman Republic to its very core. After Spartacus, the paranoia got even worse. We have accounts from slaves like Lucius, who described soldiers raiding the slave quarters at night, searching for any hint of a plot. Even a whisper of defiance could get you killed. The message was crystal clear. Do not even think about it. And here's the final, bitter twist in this story. What if you did get your freedom? It was rare, but sometimes a slave could buy their freedom or be freed by their master. But even then, were you truly free? Not really. Take a man like Gaius, who was freed for his loyal service. He was no longer a slave, but society never let him forget where he came from. That former slave label was a brand that scarred him for life, limiting his rights, his career options, and who he could marry. It was like being released from prison, but having to wear your prison uniform for the rest of your life. It was a freedom light, a hollow version of the real thing. So, when we look back at the grandeur of Rome, it's impossible to ignore the stories of oppression, rebellion, and stolen freedom that lie just beneath the surface. It's a stark reminder that empires are often built on foundations we'd rather not look at. And it forces us to ask a tough question. How do these ancient echoes of injustice, of seeing people as property, of trading humanity for profit, still show up in our world today?